Welcome back to Frequency of the Dark. This is the final transmission in this series about what it takes to make an author. I'm Daniel Bautz, and so far we've talked about books, movies, music, and we covered that whole army behind the page. Today we're going to talk about the people who stand behind the writer. I initially said I was covering mentors, but I didn't have a formal mentor walking me through the gates of the literary world like Virgil. What I had were parents, Dave and Diane, who gave me something far, far more valuable: permission. They didn't stifle creativity or shove me and my brothers in one direction of their choosing. Both of them read to us, allowing us to explore the world with imagination. They gave us guardrails, but within those rails, we were allowed to explore the dark and the light of our imaginations within the stories they read. There was never a directive for writing, but there was permission within that to be exactly who I was. My father was a contractor, an electrician to be exact. He worked 6 days a week, sun up, sun down. He was a model of what it means to stay, to work, and to finish the job. You just keep working until the work is done. My dad was an upright man. I didn't even hear him swear until I was 16, and even then, it was just once. So he displayed the work ethic that is the backbone of my writing. People think art is about waiting for a muse. Let me tell you, it is not that. It's about maintenance. It's about staying in the chair until the work is finished. My dad didn't teach me how to write a sentence, but he taught me how to show up to the page every day with integrity. What he did was illuminate the narrow path of goodness that I try to reflect in the heroes I create and the way I live. If I were to say I had a true mentor, it's my big brother. Growing up, I mimicked him. I wanted to be him. I pushed myself to be as good as he was at drawing. But, he's a much better writer than I am. And for years, I actually avoided literature because I didn't want to step on his toes or compete with his success. I tried filmmaking and art, kind of just to find my own space without taking his. He's the reason my first word was Batman. He read me comics as a toddler. While he isn't my first reader today, his presence was the original friction that sharpened my blade. I yearned to tell stories because I watched him do it. And it took a long time for me to realize that there was room for both of us in the dark. I eventually had a story that I had to tell. And that's when the competition stopped in my head, and there was never any in his, and the work and passion began. So a big component of me is the visual arts. I include a visual component in my work because that's how the stories come to me. I always see my stories like they're movies playing in my head. And I have two of my grandparents to thank for my ability to express myself visually. I inherited a talent for drawing from my paternal grandfather, and my maternal grandmother took time to to teach me how to paint with acrylics. The interesting thing is I pursued this as a career. And I was actually, throughout that entire time, always frustrated as a young artist. Because in my head, I would see these massive cinematic scenes that I wanted to put down either in paint or pencil. And I struggled to capture that single frame that is a piece of art or a drawing. I wanted to display the entire movement, the pacing, the lighting. And it wasn't until I turned to writing that I realized the canvas wasn't where I needed to be. The written page was. I used the eyes they gave me to direct the reader's gaze to the words instead of paint. So not having a direct mentor makes for a much bumpier road. You make mistakes and they for sure slow you down. A mentor could have helped guide me to avoid those mistakes. However, on the flip side of that coin, it gave me the freedom to find out who I was much quicker. It will help you, if you don't have a mentor, find who you are quicker. You aren't a Xerox of someone else's style because no one gave you a map. A great example of this is I look to Ray Bradbury. It's exactly the same way. He had a high school education and a brilliant, honest mind. He found his way by reading and by writing. There is a huge amount of dignity in being a self-learner, or as the phrase goes, an autodidact. You work in a way that matches you best. You learn to trust your own instincts because in the end, you're the only one who has to live in the world that you've built. So, what do we find at the end of this narrow path? How do we take these actual influences and actually live them? I want you to hold on to 3 things. My fingers don't work that great. First, work until the job is finished. My father didn't just do a job, he completed it. Integrity isn't a personality trait. What it is a professional standard. In writing, that means you don't wait for the feeling to strike. You stay in the chair. You finish the chapter. You honor the reader by giving them a completed thought, not a half-hearted attempt. Work ethic is the only thing that separates a dreamer from a storyteller. Second, trust these things. Trust the eyes you were given. I spent years frustrated because I couldn't paint the cinematic scale of what I saw in my head. I thought I was failing as an artist, but the truth was I was just using the wrong medium. Whether your background is in construction, music, or filmmaking, use those eyes on the page. If you think in close-ups, write in close-ups. If you understand the tension of a song, write that rhythm. Your lack of formal training is actually, wait for it, it's your greatest asset because you're bringing a different set of tools to the workbench. Finally, don't be afraid of that bumpy road. If you don't have a mentor, it's a slow way to travel, but it's the only way to arrive as that most important thing, you. When you have a guide, you're always going to be tempted to step where they stepped. When you're alone, you've got to find your own footing. You find a voice that isn't a Xerox of a writing coach or a guru. You find a manner of working that matches your own heartbeat. Like Ray Bradbury, you come to it honestly. There is no directive but the story that needs you. Embrace your mistakes. They're the only thing that belongs entirely to you. So this marks the end of our dive into the ancestral signal. We've looked at books, music, movies, and the people who stood in the gap that create your army. We've looked at the DNA, and now it's time to see what that DNA strand actually replicates. Next, we're going to move away from influences into the work itself. We're going to step into the worlds I've built and talk about the why behind the what. We're going to explore the stories that I just couldn't keep quiet. And all that said, I'm Daniel Bautz. I appreciate your time. I want to thank you for walking the narrow path with me this past month. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay tuned. The frequency is just getting started, and I can't wait to see you in the next story.